Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Oh man, do you know what? With the trips back we've had from Newcastle in the last couple of years, I've left there kind of embarrassed, angry, very annoyed, and knowing that I had these long train trips all the way back, having to write up what had just occurred in front of my eyes. Somehow, yesterday, it was almost more frustrating about the Spurs played quite well and pretty well. And it was just like, "Ugh." It's weird, isn't it, the way psychology works kind of in your brain, that I actually found it kind of more irritating to sit there and write about a game they should have won than a game that they were absolutely battered, outplayed in and looked just incapable of having any chance in. Football's weird. Tottenham are weird. They're just like very strange. I feel for everyone. I saw so many Spurs fans, spoke to them on the platform at Newcastle as we were waiting for that last train back to King's Cross due to the lovely train strikes. And everyone just trying to comprehend what they'd just seen. It was, like I said, we were all so different when we did that in April. And we were so different when we did it the previous year. You know, was it 6-1, 4-0? And this one was like, there were so many positives to it for me, but also a couple of really annoying negatives that kind of just pervade into yet another away trip for Spurs this season. But look, the thing that I've got to say straight from the off, all I was thinking, all game, pretty much, I was just sitting there and thinking, Solanke would have finished that off. Solanke would have scored that. That was all I was thinking through the game, which I think is a positive. I think it is. He's just going to have an absolute field day in this Tottenham Hotspur team. I was certain of that before the season started, and I'm now even more certain, having watched Spurs in the first 3 games of the season. And that's not based on hope or just pleading with the fates of Tottenham Hotspur or football. It's based just on facts. It is. This is a guy, 26 years old, netted 19 Premier League goals last season for Bournemouth in a team that, they had a decent season, finished 12th in the Premier League, but ultimately they scored 20 goals fewer than Postecoglou's Tottenham did. And Solanke scored more than a third of Bournemouth's goals. So in the first 3 matches of this campaign, Spurs already had 48 shots at goal. It sounds ridiculous, but yes, they had 48 shots at goal. 3 of those actually came from admittedly a rusty Solanke in his first game. Technically playing on with an ankle injury. We don't know whether that was a bad thing to do that, or we don't know. But Spurs have created so many chances and openings. There's so many times on Sunday, ignore the 20 shots that they had on Sunday. For me, it was more about just getting into certain positions where they looked up and there was no one in the box. Or like the most kind of glaring one for me, as you might have seen a still of it on social media, is Brennan Johnson. What's up, Brennan? I don't want to do like a Welsh accent. Wales International, maybe that's where my head was at. Getting down that right wing and just doing what he's been drilled and trained to do in every single training session in the last year. Don't even look up, ping that ball across the edge of the 6-yard box. Solanke, Richarlison, Will Lancashire, any of those 3 injured strikers. Only Spurs can have both of their senior strikers and their young, talent, up-and-coming striker all out for the first couple of games of the season. Any of those 3 would have been in that position to gobble that up and smash that ball into the back of the net from whatever it was, 5 yards. Unfortunately, the other Spurs players, not natural strikers, were all kind of here, there and everywhere and not in the position that they needed to be. Even Johnson, to be fair, we'll talk about this a little bit more later, he's kind of got this awareness that has been drilled into him that if that ball is on the other flank, he needs to be at that back post, which we actually saw for the goal as well. That was all I kept thinking was Solanke's there, Spurs win this game 3-4-0, 1, whatever. It's funny, you kind of always got to add a goal that the opposition have scored, but actually sometimes the game whole dynamic changes if a team goes 2 or 3-0 up. it becomes even more difficult for the other team to score because gaps appear behind them because they push forward, all of that malarkey. But yeah, it's... again, I hate to go over old ground, but so many of Solanke's goals last season were from those kind of moves. If you've watched a compilation of his 19 goals, he's 21 in all, 19 in the Premier League. If you look at them, there are so many from low balls across the box. But he wasn't there. Only Spurs could sign a £65 million striker who hadn't missed a single game throughout all of last season. And he's injured. He's injured within whatever it was, hour 90 minutes of the first game he plays for them when someone falls on his ankle. Incredible. And only then could Spurs go, oh, it's all right though. We signed him so that we had two strikers. Okay, Richie. Richie's gone down again. It's like Richarlison in training has picked up a muscle injury. I presume it's a hamstring injury. Whenever they say muscle at Spurs, we're pretty much guaranteed it's going to be a hamstring injury because that's what they do at Spurs. They pull their hamstrings. To be fair, I do think it's a thing across the Premier League. I think we're seeing a lot more hamstring injuries. It's due to the load of games. Of course, Richarlison hasn't had a load of games. But, talking to Guesty, who I do the podcast with, Golden Guest Talk Tottenham, big Everton fan. And he continues to drill into me that, look, Richarlison did not have a lot of injuries at Everton. That wasn't his thing. And I looked it up because, not that I don't trust Guesty, but, you want to check these things and check anything that is said out there is actually factually correct because, especially in the world of social media, we can parrot a lot of rubbish that we've got to check up. But, he was right. I looked, Richarlison's missed only 15 games across 4 years at Everton. In just 2 years at Spurs, he's missed 22, and he's had so many other games where he's been on the bench where either he wasn't really in a state to come on for more than a minute or so, or a couple of minutes, or that he was only fit to play 15 maybe at the most. So, you may be pushing that up number beyond 30, which is just ridiculous. Spurs ruin players, they do. I've always said it, we will take your brightest young talent and we will destroy it. Look, a lot of it is bad luck. Like Ryan Sessegnon, he turned up with an injury already then, and that was kind of what did for him really with the hamstring problems. But even Will Lancashire, like I say, 32 goals last season. I think he missed one game for the under-21s last season. Give him a little bit of first-team involvement this summer. What's that? Oh, Will's injured. Brilliant. To be fair, he did it for the under-21s against, Bristol Rovers in the trophy. He would have been on the bench. I'm pretty certain, especially the way Postecoglou spoke about him the other day. I think we did that in the last video. That very, very late night video. I was gone the next day after that. I had such a lack of sleep. But it doesn't matter. We got the video out there and we spoke about the window. But yeah, Will Lancashire. Hamstring injury again. But again, I think a lot of the players that first experienced the Postecoglou way, the incredible kind of intense training sessions that they go through, I think that's going to happen to begin with. Thankfully for Will, it's only a small one, a minor injury. I think he's expected to be back by the end of this international break. Hopefully, we'll see. But that was kind of the idea. Fate enjoys laughing at Tottenham Hotspur. It just does. It's a mean thing. And with Tottenham, we've had so many instances where it feels like things are sorted out. As I just said, two strikers. Yeah, 65 million. What are 125 million pounds worth of strikers there? Both injured at the same time. Within the, a game of the season starting. It's just incredible. But yeah, look, I don't want this to be a kind of woe is us, woe is Tottenham, because I feel like, and I think this was always going to come, I said this to Guesty ahead of the game, we were both at St James's Park. My worry was that coming straight off the back of a transfer window, that there were kind of some gripes with some people. If they then lost the next game, it was going to exacerbate all of that. Everything was going to get kind of hugely kind of inflated. And 3 games into a new season, 3 games, that was their first defeat of the season. It was an annoying one, don't get me wrong. And there are bits we're going to talk about where there are things that went wrong last season and need to be fixed. But I'm going to say that this is going to be a very unpopular opinion. There are going to be some people that are either going to get very angry or will laugh out loud and say, what a muppet you are, Gold. You can always say that. when people want to make their point, they're a little bit annoyed. They always use my surname. Don't use any of the rest of my name. It's always Gold. I don't know if they talk that like that. I may not have that accent. But my thing is, and I said this earlier on the podcast to Guesty, I have seen more positive things in the first 3 matches of this season than I probably saw across a lot of the second half of last season. It's just me. That is what I see, and I think it's in defending, and we're going to talk about defending. But I do think there's actually a hell of a lot more tighter aspects to Tottenham's defending. I think there's set pieces as well. We're going to go into that. I saw a lot of it. I said this after the Leicester game, and people were like, what are you going on about? But I saw even more of it in the Newcastle game. Newcastle, with all their height, I thought they really struggled at set pieces, and Spurs kind of dominated a lot of that. But also, I think in the attacking play and the way they're using the ball, Spurs are... It feels like they understand the Postecoglou way a lot more. They're just missing that man in the middle that absolutely gobbles up all of the chances that are going to be created for them. And that's going to happen. It's, fingers crossed, it's a bit of a freaky thing right now that, you know, they haven't got a natural striker after fixing that problem of going out and buying another striker. My hope is that over the course of the season, at least one of those 3 strikers, and I'm putting Will Lancashire in there because I do believe he's going to have one of those moments this season where he steps in and he's just a great natural young finisher. He's going to have a moment where he's going to score a goal and everyone's going to be like, okay. I think he's kind of proved this summer that he's ready to be part of that environment, and that's exactly what Postecoglou said the other day. So, yeah. Okay. So where do we start? We start with the performance. Let's not kind of, as pessimistic as we want to be about the result, and quite rightly so, because they should never have lost that game. The performance itself was light years better than the 2 previous trips to St James's Park. Light years. I mean, they were in just a shambles, an absolute shambles in those 2 games. Both of them, you know, even the second one, I remember thinking in April, like, oh, wow, they've got to this amount of minutes without conceding a goal. Yay! And that's the kind of standard you're looking at. Whereas I felt they had... Look, St James's Park is a noisy place. There's a really good atmosphere as it starts. Newcastle aren't in the greatest of form, but they are unbeaten. I was speaking to some Newcastle fans just before the train arrived, actually, and we were talking about it, and they were saying there's something funny. There's quite a good spirit within the Newcastle camp, maybe because of everything that's going on around it. It's a little bit messy around the club right now. But they kind of feel like they haven't been in the greatest form, and they're quite lucky to be in a position where they're unbeaten. However, at home, at St James's Park, with the crowd behind them, it is that cliched 12th man. You know, they are very tough for teams in those early stages, and we've seen Spurs crumble, absolutely. Whereas I thought Spurs dealt with that really well this time. I didn't feel like they panicked or were overly kind of concerned when they were being pressed and things like that. There are little moments. There's always going to be little moments. Any team that plays the press is going to get caught in possession at times. It's just an aspect of that risky strategy. Whatever team it is, you know, City will get caught on the ball playing that way. Anyone is going to get caught that way. But I thought they got through that. And bearing in mind they conceded 10 goals in those last 2 games, this was a different performance. The crowd quietened quite a lot. And yeah, I mean, they only allowed Newcastle, I say only because they scored 2 of them, but they only allowed 3 shots on goal on target at their goal. Whereas at the other end, Nick Pope had to make 6 saves. Spurs had 66% of the possession. I've got it written down here. 415 passes to Newcastle, 180, and 20 shots to Newcastle's 9 in total. Newcastle defence had to make 33 clearances and 8 blocks, as well as those 6 Pope saves. However, as we always say, all of that is great. The only thing that people remember is the scoreline, and that's it. That's the ultimate, the be-all and end-all of it, absolutely. They should have done exactly what they did against Everton. They should have buried Newcastle in an absolute avalanche of goals, exactly as they should have done against Leicester. And the problem is, it's not rocket science. If you don't score at one end, it puts more pressure on being absolutely perfect at the other end. And while the defending was so much better, that script dictated all you need is one slip up, and there it goes. And it did twice. Romero didn't have the greatest day for me. We're going to talk about why. I do think there's reasons why. On the first goal, Harvey Barnes, obviously. Second goal, Alexander Isak. And both goals came against the run of play. But the record books don't care about that. They just care about the scoreboard, what it says on that big old scoreboard up there. And look, for all the Spurs' chances and the times that Pope made saves, they didn't even score there a goal. It was Dan Burn. It's just it's such a shame. The goal itself it kind of came within this little period of really nice play from Spurs in the second half, and I think it was Pedro Porro had a cross that was deflected onto the crossbar. The ball kind of worked around and then kind of came back to Maddison. Maddison had the shot. That's pushed aside by Pope. Brennan Johnson came on at half-time, did well to kind of get this sliding effort, which was going in. Pope made a good reaction save to that, kind of clawed it across, and then Burn just very awkward, clumsy, swiping at it, and his shin smashes it straight into his own net. And Johnson in that moment, again, attacking that back post, as he's been told to do. Postecoglou was asked about kind of coming away with no points from a game like that. And he said, very similar, I guess, to our first away game when we controlled it for the most part, nullified most of the threats that Newcastle have. It's obviously a difficult opponent here at home. The crowd create a pretty strong atmosphere for the home side. Little things go their way, but I thought for the most part we handled that really well. Then we gained the ascendancy in the game and we just needed to kill it off, and we didn't, and it was a disappointing second goal. I thought we switched off a little bit, but the game should have been well over by then. So another sore one, unfortunately, where we haven't got the rewards for our play, but ultimately it's 3 strong performances from the first 3 games. The results don't reflect it in that way, though. I've seen those quotes not particularly taken well by people who were very annoyed at the result. I would say it was strong performances in the way they dominated the ball and found ways through. I actually thought against Newcastle, they did something that we kind of wanted a lot more of in previous games, was they found that if they couldn't find a way through, have a shot. There were so many times when we've kind of all got frustrated that they're trying to walk into the net, they're trying to walk it, do the thing, the low ball across the box, all of this sort of stuff. But actually, they were trying to do different things. And, Sarr had a couple of shots that were pushed wide. Maddison had a couple of shots. Porro had a shot that was tipped over the crossbar. Johnson had a great chance that he worked for himself. He did really well. I think it was a Porro effort deflected into his path, and he did this really nice touch inside and fooled Burn, who thought he was going to shoot, and he just rushed his left foot shot, put it over the bar. And there were loads of little moments like that. We're going to talk about attacking set pieces. There were lots of clever little intricate attacking set pieces, one of which, I think it was Porro, had a shot that hit Dragusin in front of the Newcastle goal, and it was like, oh, come on. And like I said, there was so many little moments where a striker in that box and what ended up being like a blocked effort or a clearance ends up the striker puts it into the net. And that's the thing. I can understand where Postecoglou's coming from when he says that about the game. I think you can be absolutely annoyed at not putting the ball in the net. You can be absolutely annoyed. This is all of us I'm talking about in general. We can all be absolutely annoyed at 2 slips in defending. But I don't think you can be too annoyed really with the overall performance. In terms of a lot of what they did was really good. Just didn't see the game out. And it's something that's very frustrating, but I do feel like it's going to be a product of the start of this season and hopefully isn't something that we'll see as it goes on. I'll explain why in a little bit. I'm going to talk about the defence first, because that was very frustrating for me, because I was really kind of keeping quite a close eye on the defence and how they worked, because obviously it was a different backline. We had Radu Dragusin come in for Mickey van der Ven, who I think he trained a little bit in the week, and there was a feeling he was going to be ready and just wasn't quite right as it got near the time. Bearing in mind this is the same back 4, it was going to be the same back 4 and goalkeeper that shipped 4 goals in April to Newcastle. But on the whole, with Dragusin swapping for Van der Ven, did a lot of positive stuff. I was watching in the warm-up before the game Matty Wells, who does a lot of the defensive stuff, was really drilling them on dealing with high balls into the box, which they dealt with really well, and the ability to turn as a group when the ball was played over the top. They did that really well, apart from the key moment. And that's the thing. If you're a defender or a goalkeeper, it doesn't matter how many things you get right and how well you work on something and how hard you work on something. If you mess it up once, that's all people remember, because that's the key thing. That's your job, is to keep them out for the entire thing. Admittedly, at the other end, if they score more goals, it becomes less of an issue. Set pieces, so much better. Please keep an eye on them, because I'm still getting people telling me that set pieces are rubbish. They're not. They're really not. We spoke about it in a previous video. Nick Montgomery's come in, one of the two new coaches, and he's had a bit more of it's a collective thing, but he's had more of an influence on set pieces, both defensive and attacking. And defensively, very little got past Spurs, honestly. Even annoyingly, the first goal, where that comes from, that's originally is a quick throw, but what that originally came from was Spurs dealing very well with a ball into the box that they cleared with a couple of headers. Everything's much more organised in there. I was watching it because it's, like I've said before, it's a zonal / man marking system. It's a hybrid thing. And what I'm seeing this time, apart from one occasion, which Guesty and I both were like, what? The players that are weaker in the air, so we'll say the attacking players, Johnson, Kulusevski, despite his height, he definitely isn't great in the air. Sonny, he'll be the first to admit it's not one of his strengths. Those kind of players, last season, we were seeing them marking people because it was zonal. We were seeing them up against like big defenders, whereas now they're the ones that, apart from this one occasion, were picking up midfielders and people like that who aren't probably going to be the aerial threats. And all the right people that you want marking the big guys are doing that. And it makes such a difference. It's such a silly, obvious thing, but it makes such a difference. The one moment we're talking about is we were watching it and Sonny was marking Isak. And we have no idea why, because he was like towering over him. He is a guy that can win a header. Thankfully, it didn't come to anything. But it was obviously some kind of miscommunication there, and Sonny was ending up having to be left with him. I do think Radu Dragusin's aerial ability, his height, his whole presence in the box helped a lot as well. And that'll only be further helped when you have Solanke or Richarlison up front, because that is another person that can come back and be a big presence in the box. Attacking set pieces, I thought, were really good. If you get to, I don't know why you'd want to watch the match back, but if you get a chance to, or you just remember it, there were probably 3 or 4 of these really clever short free kicks where Sonny or Decky would make a run into the box, and Maddison or Porro would quickly pass it to them. They would then accept the ball in the box, but then quickly flick it back to the edge of the area where someone would run in. And that resulted in, I think, one of Sar's shots came from that. Porro had that shot that hit Dragusin. And it was just, there's much more about the attacking set piece. They weren't awful last season. People made a big deal about it. They scored 11 attacking set piece goals last season. They scored 16 the previous one under the much celebrated Gianni VO. So it wasn't like they dropped off the face of the earth. They just scored 5 fewer. That was all it was. And I think they'll get a lot more. They've already got one, haven't they, through Romero this season. So, set pieces are much better at both ends of the pitch. And hopefully that will continue. Dragusin. I was going to talk about Dragusin. Radu Dragusin, I thought, had a really good game. You've got to remember he's 22 years old as well. I keep forgetting that because he plays with someone with a much more kind of older, just his gait as well, the way he kind of, his movement, but also just the way he plays, the way he reads the game is very good. He's a big defensive talent. He is not at Spurs to be a bit part player. This is a guy who was one of the better defenders in Serie A last season before he made the move to Spurs. And, we know very well that he chose Spurs over Bayern Munich. So he's just not like some mug that's just rocked up from some, just anywhere. He's a very good player. And I do think this was another display of, I'm ready for this. And if Romero and Van der Ven are not going to perform, they're not going to coast by on just who they are and their name and the fact that they've been first choice for Spurs. He's going to be pushing hard to take their place. He's got a lot of games, I think, coming up on the horizon. He'll presumably play a lot of the European and Carabao Cup games coming up as well. But as we've seen, any player that kind of excels in those games, they're going to be pushing their claims in the other ones. And I think we'll see him. Some people have said maybe about using a back three. Who knows? That might happen at some point. Like I said, Van de Ven looked like he was going to be able to play, and then late on in the kind of process, wasn't there. Wasn't going to be risked. Not risked for international duty either, which is, let's be honest, probably a good thing. Well, I think it is a good thing. We'll talk about it a little bit later, how I think there is some benefits from some of the players that are now going off on international duty, but I think for Van de Ven, I don't think it would have been the cleverest idea. And so he is going to recuperate and recover, and hopefully there's quite a big game coming up after the international break that we hope is going to be ready for. Postecoglou said ahead of the game, Mickey was close in training this week, but with the international break, he's not quite 100%. Part of me was keen to give Radu a run, especially at this venue. So yeah, we're going Radu today. And, we saw what Dragusin did at the Euros. He was fantastic. That was a big experience in his development as well. I think feeling that on the world stage, or the European stage certainly, he could be a big player, and got lots of plaudits from the pundits and everyone really. And he just took that form into this game, which was, his first real kind of foray of this season. 2 terrific sliding stops on, I think it was Barnes and Isak during the game. The latter, guess he thinks the latter could have been a penalty. I can see what it means, because he kind of takes a bit of Isak's leg as he does a shot, but I think the fact that Isak gets the shot away, he's not really impeding that effort. I don't know whether that's even a thing, but I thought he just did really well to get back, but I've seen those given. And also he showed that ability to chase back as well. He's no slouch. This is the thing. We just see Van de Ven, and he is essentially Usain Bolt in a Spurs shirt with his pace. It's just incredible. But that doesn't mean Dragusin is slow. It's like you're putting some kind of tortoise in there to try and do the same thing. He is quick. It was unfortunate, actually, for the winning goal. He tried to get back, just couldn't quite get there in time. But on the day, 4 clearances, 1 tackle, 1 interception, blocked 1 shot. A lot of confidence with his feet. I was really kind of impressed with his passing under pressure as well. 86.4% pass success rate from his 44 attempts. He wasn't just trying little, small, short passes to people. He was trying other efforts as well. He had 1 effort at goal as well. Headed the ball just wide from a Kulusevski corner. Not used to Kulusevski taking corners, but he did. I asked Postecoglou after the game about Dragusin and what he thought of him. He said, I thought he was good, Radu. He was a great opportunity to expose him. I mean, he's only 22. He's still a young man, especially for a defender. And I thought exposing him to this atmosphere and the particular threat that Newcastle posed with Isak up front, he had to be really concentrated, and I thought he was. I think he's going to play a big part in our season. Him coming through that whole experience will set him up well. The one thing that he did to put Dragusin into the team was that he ended up swapping them around so that Romero played on the left and Dragusin on the right. I've seen Romero on the left. It hasn't always worked in the past, and that was kind of the case again this time. I didn't feel like when he was bringing the ball out of defence, he was as comfortable. And Romero, you kind of lose that. I think Romero is quite good in his build-up play, and we see him trying to force the issue with passes through the middle, passes out wide. He obviously knows kind of where Porro and Johnson are going to run. And I just felt on the left, it looked a little bit more like, ooh, this is a bit alien territory to me. He wasn't quite getting it. And Dragusin often was kind of having to run back and cover behind him anyway. So Dragusin on occasions was ending up playing on the left of defence, as it were. The thing I would say about Romero, because I want to give him this as an excuse right now, because I do think it's valid, and it's something that we kind of said a little while back. I still think he looks like a player that turned up for training quite late, not just like on the day, in the summer. And I think, Argentina, there might have been a few celebrations after they picked up their second Copa America as well. And I kind of feel like he looks like he's not quite as sharp as he could be. And I definitely feel like around the hour mark onwards in games, maybe slightly before, he's starting to look a little bit more leggy, but also his decision-making looks a little bit tired at times as well. And I think that's something that's going to come with fitness and minutes. He had the ball in the net early on in the game, but it was flagged offside, and he was well offside. Defending-wise, 2 tackles, 2 clearances, blocked 1 shot. But yeah, his positioning wasn't great for the 2 goals. First one was a strange one. Like I say, I think it was a set piece that was cleared up the pitch, and Romero just went off like a man possessed. He just went sprinting up the pitch to press. He was the furthest man. He was like the striker, which wasn't really necessary. Look, it looked great. It was like, oh, look at Romero. What a madman. Yeah, he's pressing. Go, Christian. And it was a bit like, but actually, you've just kind of left a massive hole behind you. And as soon as the ball went out of play, Newcastle reacted very quickly, threw it up the pitch. There was a big gap down the right-hand side. I think Porro from the set piece was still actually over on the left from where he'd been for that. Maddison, to be fair to him, really tried to get down that flanker and to get something on trying to stop the cross into the box. He couldn't. Basuma had got into the box as well. He couldn't stop the cross. It was just from that point on, just everything kind of not going the Spurs way, and it finds Barnes in the box, and he just kind of places it into the goal quite well, to be fair. Romero kind of trotting back as if he was on a little Sunday stroll, and does the old cliched, throws arms up in the air like, oh, what have you guys done? I'll leave you for 1 minute and look what you do. And it's like, well, did you have to leave us? There was no real need for him to sprint up the pitch like a madman. Yeah, and the winning goal, you can look at it in two ways. The winning goal, there's a great image that's kind of been captured of the moment. I think it's Joe Linton plays the ball over the top into Murphy's run. Three of the defenders are all turning. They're all in the process of being ready to turn and go with that ball. Romero is just standing there, almost like stepping out as if he's playing an offside, but I don't think he was. He didn't look like he's playing offside. I think he is generally just moving towards the ball. It could be, but that's the other side. He could maybe have been the only one that was trying to play an offside line. But as the leader of that back line, as the 26-year-old vice-captain of the team, he should be arms out telling everyone to get up, rather than just, I'm going to walk forward, if that was the case. I'm still not entirely sure that's what he was trying to do. But yeah. Again, like I say, it could be a little bit of mental fatigue that he's not quite there yet in these kind of high-intensity games where he will be. It's just a shame because all three goals that Spurs have conceded this season, Romero's been involved in some capacity. The one, with Vardy, he was involved again, leaving him completely unmarked to score in that game. So, look, I don't want this to sound like I'm absolutely having a pop at Christian Romero because I still do believe he is one of the best defenders in the game. He's won it all. He's won the World Cup. He's won 2 Copa Americas. He is a top draw defender, but I just think he's got to show that consistently over the season for Spurs to kind of get the plaudits that he does in England, that he does probably in Europe and also especially in Argentina. I do think that will come with fitness, and he might be one of these that is being helped by the international break because he's going to go off with Argentina now. He's got a couple of tough World Cup qualifiers against Chile and Colombia. As long as he returns uninjured, that's the key thing. But I do think that just getting another, 180 minutes or so in his legs is going to be a good thing for him. I think we need him to be a guy that is still kind of racing or able to race around, not in a mad way, coming into the last 10 minutes of a game because, Spurs teams, the fitness levels have to be so high to play the Postecoglou way because you are going up and down constantly. I don't think it was Romero's best day. In terms of the protection for the back line, I thought Basuma played pretty well. There were a couple of moments you could have protected them slightly better, maybe read the danger, but I actually thought it was quite a decent display from him. Again, he was another one that did look a little bit tired as it reached probably the hour mark or so. But that's a hallmark, as I said before. He only played 45 minutes a game in pre-season. He wasn't getting full games under his belt. And then obviously missed the game against Leicester due to his... Steven Bergwijn is going to the Saudi Pro League. Well, there you go. Wow. There you go. Some interesting moves to that league. I do think a lot of teams that... a lot of players that were not able to get away in that window, suddenly the Saudi Pro League has become an option for them. But little blast from the past there. Basuma, missed the Leicester game, so he's still building up his base fitness. He's only had 2 kind of hour-long displays since was he injured, wasn't he? Was it May, April? So in all of those months. So he's going to be a little bit behind. But I do feel like his performances have been generally positive since the suspension. Maddison, I thought, was good for quite long periods of the game. There is always going to be the odd time with him where he maybe dips out of the game slightly. But I thought not only was he quite creative and he had a few shots at goal as well, he had one that he curled towards. It looked like it was going towards the top corner. It ended up being slightly more central than that Pope had to push away. But I thought he is looking more like the Maddison of last season, which is quite important. I think, again, just building up the confidence in himself after a tough summer, being left out with England, and also just being comfortable and confident in his body again, which obviously it never really looked like he was in the second half of last season. Lots of little issues, and I think he's also, having a bit of competition is good for him as well. Kulusevski has had a couple of games now where he's looked very, very good as a number 8/10. And Lucas Borival as well, who, I'm going to pronounce it like that. He's obviously going to be some talent as well. And I think all of that pushes Maddison, as well as, he's missed another England squad he's been left out of. I think all of that is a good thing for Spurs. In a very selfish way, I think that's going to help him be better and better. There was an interesting moment, actually, involving Maddison and Bissouma. It was first half. We had this moment where the game just suddenly stopped and everyone started having a drinks break. We were wondering what had happened. I think one of the assistant officials picked up an injury and the fourth official had to replace them. So we had this little 5-minute span where everything kind of went a little bit, subdued. And you're always worried about players picking up little injuries and things like that. But during that period, James Maddison came over and got a drink, and Matt Wells was really going to this very involved tactical kind of little thing with him, and they were doing all of that. They always do that, don't they? It means kind of like one player going one way and the other covering for them and things like that. And there was a real intense discussion about it. Not like they were arguing or anything, but Maddison was like, okay, so you want me to do that? Okay, what do I do in this? And it was like a really involved one. It was one of those, because the Newcastle press box is quite decent. It's only just behind the dugout, so you can really see in great detail and hear some of the stuff. I couldn't hear exactly what they were saying. So he did that, and then Maddison trotted over after that and went over to Bissouma and essentially pointed back and said, your turn. And Bissouma went over, but instead of Wells talking to him, it was Nick Montgomery. Nick Montgomery then did a little kind of a session, like a chatting session, explaining exactly what he wanted from him. And and it worked. I did think the midfield looked very good for long periods, but ultimately it didn't work. But, well, I suppose it was different players on the pitch, I think, by that point, wasn't it? Or am I going mad? Trying to remember now when the goal came. 78 minutes, were they both off the pitch by then, Bissouma and Maddison? My memory's not good. Please feel free to let me know. But yeah, no, I thought the two of them were okay. We're probably above average, and that's a big improvement on last season. I think they'll get better and better as well. Pedro Porro, Destiny Udogie, two differing performances for me. I felt Porro was very busy, got involved in a lot of the attacking play. He does like a shot over the bar, but he did have one that really tested Pope as well. He tipped over. It's 6 shots in all. I've written it down here. And defending wise, 4 tackles, 2 interceptions, 2 clearances. I think the difference between Porro and Udogie right now, again, I'm sorry to harp on about it, but when you're early in the season, this kind of is part of it. It's fitness. Porro had a really strong pre-season, lots of game time. I'd say he, Kulusevski and Son were probably the fittest players in pre-season and probably got the most minutes when you look at it as well. Whereas with Udogie, been out since April when he had that operation. First minutes back were in the Bayern home friendly just before the season started. And now, he's had these 3 starts where you can just see he's trying to shake off the rust, or cobwebs, shake off rust, but trying to get rid of the rust, shake off the cobwebs. I just feel like that with Udogie. He's not as sharp as he should be. At both ends of the pitch, I think his decision making in the final third isn't great, or his ability to kind of. There were, to be fair to him, a few times he was racing through the middle in an inverted role and he wasn't picked out. But yeah, he's not quite where he needs to be. And I think you can see that. He's putting in the effort, but the quality of what he's doing and decision-making isn't there. And that comes, it's people kind of really underestimate kind of mental fatigue as well. It is a big thing when footballers are trying to make decisions in like a nanosecond. But yeah, again, maybe, hopefully with no injuries, him being back in the Italy squad, I think they're playing France and Israel in Nation League fixtures. It's more match minutes, and I don't think that's a bad thing for him, especially as there's a rather tough test coming up for him, which was a big one for him last year with Saka and Arsenal. But yeah, I do feel like that defence is going to get sharper as each passing week goes on. And I think you'll see that kind of ripple through the team. I know there's a big, how do I put this, irritation and annoyance at the way Spurs defend in the Postecoglou way. But I'll always go back to what Maddison said in an interview. I think it was after the Leicester game. It was either Leicester game or one of the pre-season games, where he said it kind of always looks a lot worse than it is with defence because they play this high line. The majority of times it looks like a ball's gone through and it's been and it's like, the other team have got through. But most of the time they're either offside because it's been played really well, or one of those defenders is mopping up, which is exactly the point of the way that defending is meant to be. And also it allows them to squeeze the opposition half so much that, it becomes the other team have to play that perfect pass. They will. Some teams are going to do that, but then it's about the recovery pace. So yeah, it's a scary tactic. Is it an absolutely perfect tactic? No. Is it part of this system? Yes. But there is also, the defenders are going to get used to it. They're going to get fitter. They're going to understand what they have to do. They're going to understand when each other has to cover each other. Vicario's going to understand when he's got to rush out and kind of pick something up as well, or clear it. So it's it's a defence that I think is probably a little bit more nuanced than people think it is, but there's no getting away from that. They currently are conceding too many goals. It's 3 goals in 3 games, but they're conceding goals through sloppy defensive play when the rest of the game's been really good. But yeah, biggest test yet arrives after the international break, and a team they're going to have to be absolutely switched on, who are going to try to test and probe that high line. And it'll be interesting to see how high it sits that day as well, and whether he does tweak that at all, because this idea that Postecoglou does not bend, he does not shake, it's not quite that. He doesn't change his philosophy, but he absolutely adapts his tactics if he sees that things need to be tweaked because they're not working. We're not talking a massive sea change or anything like that, but he will, if he feels that like it is just suicidal to play too high up the pitch, he will change that in certain games. And you do see they sit slightly deeper. But yeah, ultimately it's about keeping the ball in the opposition half. Really, that's the main thing. You do that, don't give the ball away in silly moments, they're not getting even the chance to go and have these opportunities as well anyway. So that's the defence. Back at the other end of the pitch, I wanted to start with Brennan Johnson because I thought it was a really positive kind of day for Brennan Johnson. I do feel sorry for Brennan. I think a lot of the scapegoats have gone in the last year at the club. They've had this massive kind of clear out of a lot of players behind the scenes, and I think, when things go wrong, we all do, myself included, we will look at people and we'll say that was their fault. And then sometimes you can't shake that belief that it was their fault again for the next one, even though when maybe you analyse it properly and it wasn't their fault. And I think Brennan has come in, I don't want to call him Brennan like he's my mate, Brennan Johnson has come in with that 50 million price tag on his head, which is a huge thing for a young guy. He was 22 when he came in, he's 23 now. That is something that kind of weighs heavy sometimes on players when they're trying to make an impact. They're a bit younger, they're going to have a bit of inconsistency. We know he had 15 goal involvements last season, which was a decent return for his first season. But what I would say is he's the only one that gets exactly what Postecoglou wants. He's the only one that delivers it time and time again. He's young, so he is going to have inconsistent touches. He is going to make inconsistent decisions at times. And I still feel like the hamstring injury last season just makes him hesitate sometimes when he wants to run at his man. Also, I do think seeing Pedro Porro way in advance of him probably worries him as well, and thinks, "Ooh, if I lose the ball here, am I absolutely leaving the rest of the team open behind me?" Because he is actually quite good at defending. We've said this in the past. His defensive work probably goes unnoticed quite a lot of the time. And look, does he need a kick up the backside once in a while? Yes, absolutely, as so many players do. And I do think benching him from time to time does create a string of better performances for him. He has not started the season well. He didn't at all. He looked a little bit, little bit kind of withdrawn, and I don't think his confidence was high. And look, the social media stuff, we know it's got through to him because he limited his Instagram comments. When was it? It was last season. And they are still like that now. It's only very, very, I think it's people maybe he follows can actually reply to his Instagram posts. So the fact that that's still like that means that, look, the criticism he was getting did impact him. And he kind of thought, I don't want to see that underneath my posts every time I do one. I we can all have differing opinions on it. I don't believe on social media trying to dig someone out is the greatest way to go about it. I don't. Other people think differently. That's absolutely fine. Everyone uses social media in different ways. Obviously, there's different kind of ways of looking at it, whether it's like just really unnecessary, unpleasant and abusive, or whether it is just a critical thing. I don't know. I don't really think that you solve anything by doing that, personally. I just feel like he's one of these young players that, because he's a bit of a confidence player, I think he needs to feel that people are behind him. I think it's a big thing that Postecoglou is really behind him. Postecoglou really believes in him, and I think he can see he's got such a high ceiling. That's the big thing with Brennan Johnson, is that the technique is there. Don't get me wrong, it is occasionally inconsistent, and I think that's what people seize upon. But actually, his technique, like the little moment where he turns inside Burn, it's a lovely little bit of thinking and close control in a very tight moment. But in the next moment, you can see the inconsistency because he rushes his shot and sends it over the crossbar. He did well for the goal. Every time I think he's been taken out of action and put on in a bench role, that first game back from the bench, he changes the game. And then normally the pattern is the next couple of games, he looks really strong from the start as well. So it's not like he's just an impact sub or anything like that. But yeah, reacted well for the goal. And you could see how delighted he was. Even though it wasn't his goal, he was like really punching the air, very, very happy. I think he needed that moment as well. He did well on the day. He did. I think Lloyd Kelly being on a yellow card was good as well. I think that helped him. I think it meant that he could really be a bit of a menace to him and cause him all kinds of problems, which he did. Postecoglou actually explained why he took off Pat Matasar, who I thought had done okay in the first half. Had those couple of shots, had kind of got in the face of Newcastle, but as soon as he got a yellow card, that then became a little bit of a problem. And Postecoglou said, I only took him off because Pape had been booked, and part of his game, he just really gets stuck into the opposition. And on the flip side, Lloyd Kelly had been booked. So with Brennan coming on and running at them, I just felt we'd run over the top of them in the second half. I got that sense just before half-time, and I thought if we can get the ball to our wide players, we can cause them some problems, and it did. It worked out that way, but we simply just didn't take advantage of it. Johnson just does what he's told. That's what he does. He gets down the flank, he pulls that ball across. One of them was deflected up in the air, and Odegaard was at the back post. It was a touch unlucky, to be honest. He just kind of threw himself at it, and it hits his knee and bounces over the bar. Like I say, Johnson had that chance himself. And then there was that lovely ball that he puts across the 6-yard box that there's no one there to get. I thought it was a really positive kind of display from him. And I'd love to see people get behind him because... I just feel that people have just decided, like, I don't know, almost like they're linking him in with, I don't know whether it's linked in with transfers, the price tag, or just not kind of rating him. And that's fine, but I do feel like, I don't know whether it undermines him or not at all. I don't know. I never really like it when young players, especially, are on the receiving end of it all, because I think he's got a hell of a lot of talent. And this is my belief this season, I think he's going to, I said it before the season started, I think he's going to have a really big season. And I think he will end up being the chief creator for Solanke. I think we saw it last season with Richarlison. Richarlison and him got this really nice link up when Richarlison was fit, that he was just finding him over and over again. And Richarlison was able to score a few kind of almost identical goals from low Brennan Johnson balls. And I think Solanke's going to have a similar relationship with him. I think he's going to look out to that right-hand side, know where Johnson's going to put it, and he's going to bust the gut to get into those areas to slam it home. I think we'll see Johnson better those 15 goal involvements. I think he's got to score more himself. To be fair to him, he's the only one really of the wingers that understands that getting to the back post thing. The Postecoglou and his coaches have drilled that into him, and he scored some big goals last season by doing that. Whereas Odegaard, for example, he's very new. He's very green in the whole Postecoglou system, and there were quite a few times when he wasn't there at the back post when the ball was coming on from the right. That'll all come though, as with the final ball with Odegaard. Very exciting, but still not really understanding the movement of his teammates. Johnson spoke after the game, actually. He said, I think we did play well, and that's what causes the most frustration. It was a good performance in terms of dominating the game. It doesn't get much tougher to come and do that here. At the end of the day, though, we've come away with nothing, which is really disappointing because of the football we played, the chances we created. It's easy to say we deserve to score, but we've got to be more clinical and have better decision-making. It really hurts to lose today. In terms of performance, that's the only thing we can take now. We can't keep dwelling on these games where we haven't scored enough goals and we've lost. Of course, we're going to think about it and ways we can stop them from scoring. But I think in terms of the performance, how dominant we were, especially in that second half for large parts, that's all we can take going into the next game. The amount of shots just shows how well we were playing. Most of them weren't even pot shots either. We were getting some really good opportunities. Pap had a couple from the edge of the box. Maybe another couple of them were rushed, including mine on my left foot was definitely a bit rushed. It just shows the amount of chances we're creating, and it hurts to say we only scored one goal today when we've got to score more than that. So I thought that was really good, kind of a good day for Johnson. I think we'll see a lot more of him this season, as he kind of just needs a target to aim for. And I think Solanke will prove to be that target. There was a weird attacking moment, a set-piece moment in the second half when Spurs won a free kick. I can't remember who was taken down. It might have been Maddison. I can't remember who. But they won a free kick right on, just outside, like 5 yards outside the Newcastle penalty area. Perfect. One of those really dangerous positions. And Maddison and Porro both stood over it. And you could see they couldn't really decide who was going to take it. Whether that was like a little kind of argument or whether they just generally were like, no, you take it. I don't think it would be. I think it would probably be more they wanted to take it. Whatever happened, they couldn't decide. And Sonny kind of came running over and really frustrated, bellowed across at the touchline and Postecoglou as if to say, you sort them out kind of thing. And this was my interpretation of it. I could be completely wrong, but this was what it looked like from where we were behind the dugout. And Dragusin kind of had to pass on the message. Postecoglou looked straight at them and just went held a 2 and a 3 up, as if to say 23. Porro is his one. Porro kind of curls the ball just over the crossbar, which of course is always going to be the way in those situations. But it was a funny one. I don't know why Postecoglou had to make a decision, why the two players couldn't sort it out amongst themselves, or even why Sonny, I guess, as captain, who's a strong leader, whether he couldn't have just said, I'm going to pick you on this occasion, you do it. It was a little bit of a funny one, that one, which I haven't seen before, the manager having to actually decide who takes a free kick. Seen it with penalties, but not with a free kick. Talking to the other attackers and Sonny had an impact. He made 3 key passes. Like I said, he was really good in the attacking set-piece moments as well. But just in other stages, he kind of drifted out of the game a little bit. I feel sorry for him because he is kind of playing this role where he's kind of being asked to be a central striker at times. He's kind of being asked to be a left winger at times. He doesn't really know exactly where he's meant to be playing at the moment. It's a bit like Kulusevski, I thought, had a good game playing as a false 9, but then we saw this, someone posted on social media, this average position map for, I think it was the first 55 minutes of the game, and there wasn't a single player average position was anywhere inside or near the penalty area. And that, unfortunately, when you've got a false nine, if Kulusevski is going to come deeper, the players around him then have to fill the gap behind him, and that wasn't really happening. Like I said with Odegaard will get better. He kind of showed some quite exciting moments. He worked some good space, which led to, I think it was Sarr's first effort on goal that was saved by Pope. And Postecoglou likes him. You can see that. The fact that he started 2 in a row is a good thing for him. Again, is another player that kind of needs to get used to the ridiculously high levels that are required in the Postecoglou system, both not only attacking but also being able to run back as well. Kulusevski, 3 key passes. Son and he both had 1 dribble, but he also worked really hard when he went back into the midfield. Decky as well. He had 2 interceptions, 2 clearances, and 1 tackle. But all of those attacking players just needed a striker in the middle of it all. That's all they needed. I think that just changes the entire dynamic of that game. It's just... I put that to Postecoglou as well. I said after the game, there was so many moments when that ball was whipped into the box and it just needed someone there. You needed a natural striker, didn't you? And he said, yeah, potentially. But I still think even outside of that, we just had some really good opportunities, a little bit more composure. Fair play to Pope. I thought he had an outstanding game, but I thought we could have tested him a few more times with just some better decision making. It's not just the opportunities we did create. I thought there were another probably 6 to 10 moments where we could have created even more opportunities. That's been a constant theme for us that we're trying to break through. He was also asked whether they would deliberately, he'd instructed them to take more shots from outside the box. And he said, no. When an opposition defence stays deep, it's pretty hard to get in there. There were 10 bodies in there at times. Apart from Isak, everyone else was in there. But we worked our way into that area pretty well. But there were other times when we got even closer to goal in the box. And obviously, like I said, we just lacked a bit of composure. Sometimes our positioning was off where we should have been with work, and we let them off the hook. Spurs have got loads and loads of games coming up after this international break, and they're just going to have to score goals of plenty. They need to turn domination into obliteration, quite frankly. They need to absolutely destroy teams, like they did against Everton. That Everton scoreline should have been what happened in all 3 games. Spurs should be sitting on 9 points, maximum points, same as City and Liverpool. They really should. We can kind of look at these 3 games and think it's the end of the world and think the apocalypse is coming, the Tottenham apocalypse, and, another change of manager. It's 3 games where they've played pretty well on the whole. They just haven't put the games away, and they need that striker up there. Solanke, yes, played in the first game, but he did not look sharp. He hadn't played a match for, I think it was almost 3 weeks. And we know now that he was also carrying an ankle issue as well. It'll come. It will come. And this is my feeling. And you might remember me saying this in previous videos. I kind of always expected this season. This isn't me just saying this was what happened. I said this, I don't know, a month, 2 months ago, whatever it was. I felt like this season was going to be the reverso, bizarro version of last season. Last season we know Spurs started like an absolute freight train. When in first 10 games or so were absolutely brilliant, unbeaten, whatever it was. I think it was 10 games, wasn't it? Only to start to fade as the season wore on because the squad wasn't strong enough. Injuries really hammered them. And you had players that were starting matches that just didn't really fit the Postecoglou way. And then he also had a lack of options on the bench when he wanted to change things as well. Even those as well that were a better fit for the Postecoglou system were still trying to work out the Postecoglou system and understand it all. So here we are a year on. Squad knows his ways much better. He's shed a lot of those players that don't get it and don't fit into it. And he's brought in newcomers that fit it much better than the other ones did. And obviously we know about the young players that will come in and fit it with their versatility as well. And it is a stronger squad. I've kind of seen people saying it isn't. For me, it is. It's stronger in terms of it's more fit for purpose. Other than those defensive, like left-sided centre-back or a pacey centre-back and a left-back, which we've spoken about, so we're not going to go into that. I would say everywhere else there's at least 2 people in every position. It's quite strong. There's a lot of options. The bench was probably the weakest we're going to see it for a little while on Sunday in terms that Alfie Devine had to come into it. Alfie likely to head out on loan. We'll speak about it in a moment. But yeah, I do feel like he that bench was probably, that's going to be a lot stronger bench in the weeks to come, and a lot more options in various places as well. But so I kind of felt like the reason it's going to be flipped around was that you've got this annoying thing with those pesky international tournaments that are happening that we just spoke about. Defence. The defence were going to come in, key players were going to come in, looking to kind of get their fitness up. This has happened at other clubs, it's not just Spurs related. But you're going to have the likes of Van der Ven, Romero, Bentancur as well, who played quite late into tournaments or came back late from tournaments, and we're going to have to build up their fitness. Then you've got others like Udogie, who has been out since April with an injury, who's going to have to build up his fitness. Richarlison, unfortunately, injured again. And I mean, don't even foresee Solanke picking up his injury as well. But he would have probably had to kind of take a little bit of time to get into the system because he hasn't played in a Postecoglou way. He was a late arrival in the summer window because, Spurs trying to pry him away from Bournemouth. And so my whole opinion, you might remember me saying, it was going to take Spurs a little while to get into their stride. So it might be a slower start, but by the time they got into their stride, they were going to have all these players that were going to play so many games that they were all going to be sharp. They're going to rotate, and they get the Postecoglou football. They're a year down the line as well. And look, the opening games, maybe the actual performances have probably been stronger than I even expected, but silly moments in front of goal, silly moments behind at their own, in front of their own goal. And they've mucked up the chance to, like I say, probably be on 9 points now rather than having 1 win, 1 draw and 1 defeat. It's international break now, so it's time to reflect a little bit for Postecoglou. It's not like he can really work on stuff on the training ground. I think the only players I was working it out, he's got obviously the injured players in rehab, but in terms of fit players, James Maddison, Pedro Porro, Timo Werner and Jed Spence. I think they're the only 4 senior outfield players that are fit and available. Rodrigo Bentancur as well. Obviously, he's got a 4-game international ban following his bottle throwing. Let's put it that way. Sergio Reguilon, of course, is there, but he'll be looking to sort of move away in the next couple of days. You've got the Portuguese transfer window still open, Dutch one, Turkish one, Polish one, Saudi Pro League, I think was closing today, which is why we're seeing this little flurry of activity that I can see going across social media to my right. Same goes for Alfie Devine. I think he's got about 5 or 6 clubs currently interested in him. You would imagine Portuguese and Dutch windows maybe be the prime locations for him. Who knows? Wouldn't rule out the Polish one. Vuskovic is in Poland, isn't he? I would probably personally prefer to see him in the Dutch or Portuguese league because I think technique-wise it's going to really suit Alfie's way and his ability with the ball. But you can't rule out it's almost like, I don't want to say beggars can't be choosers, but it gets to that stage where you kind of take just whatever gets you the amount of minutes really at this stage and maybe revisit in January because he needs that. He does. He needs the game time. It's such a shame for him. He had so many championship clubs that I think were interested in him, and just Spurs messed it all up a little bit really in terms of telling clubs that he wasn't available for loan earlier in the window, and it gets towards the end of the window and they went, oh no, actually, you can go out on loan. And it's a bit like, well, all those clubs that were looking at him have now had to move on to other targets and they can't kind of come in for him. Who else we got? Yves Bissouma is with Mali. He's back in their squad, away from Postecoglou's watchful eye. We'll see whether that's a good thing or not. I don't know if you've noticed, but Yves Bissouma's social media has suddenly become this very old-fashioned, wholesome family social media. His family have been down. Whether that was planned or whether his family have come, we're coming to England. You're getting yourselves in all kind of bother. I don't know. But all of it has been like with his parents. It's really nice stuff. But you kind of think what happened and what he got the suspension for and what appeared on social media, then to go quickly, look, here's my family. Oh, yeah. We'll see. We'll see. Hopefully goes away, gets more minutes because I think he needs to get sharper as well. No injuries, please. And then comes back all ready for the rest of the season, or certainly in the next couple of months, before they have another international break. For Postecoglou, he's got to sort out his squads that he's going to register. That's another big thing as well. First up is the Europa League squad. That has to be submitted by 11 p.m. on September the 3rd, which is tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow. I'm not going to go into all the details other than to say the current numbers dictate that, of course, Reguilón can't be included, but also one other cannot be included. You would think, looking at it, it's maybe going to be Fraser Forster in terms of Forster could maybe be given games, the Carabao Cup matches, and the European games may be offered to Brandon Austin if that's the way they're going to do it. As Guesty said earlier, and he's quite right in the podcast, it is a little bit scary not to have that experienced backup keeper in the tournament, certainly the group stage games. But maybe, you have Vicario on the bench in case you are a little worried at the moment. I don't know. The trouble is you could easily say that, but then you look at it and you think, what outfield player is left out? You need a lot of the kind of players outside the established first team starting 11. You need them to be playing. But you also can't say, I don't know, we're not going to use Romero at all in Europe because, we don't want him getting injured and overplayed. Because you just might need him. I think he's got the European, hasn't he? Got the European ban overhanging into this one. I can't remember now. Feels like an age ago. So that's the Europa League squad. We'll find out tomorrow exactly the makeup of that and whether there's any little curveballs that come our way. Premier League doesn't have to be in until September 13th, just before the international break, just before the Premier League restarts after the international break. Far more relaxed rules in that competition, so yeah, everyone can be in there. Even you could include Reguilón if he didn't go, although having asked Postecoglou about Reguilón and Lo Celso and what would happen if they didn't leave, he pretty much hinted that they would have no future with him. He said, essentially signed off by saying, it won't, whatever happens with them, it won't affect us and what happens in the first team. So we'll see on that one. I know there's some people that want Reguilón as another backup left back. I don't see it myself. I think in terms of numbers, I get it, but as you said when he was talking about centre backs, Postecoglou, it's all very well looking at it and seeing, it's another number. But if that person doesn't fit the system and doesn't do what I want them to do, ultimately it's a useless number. It doesn't mean anything. It is essentially almost like a blank space in the squad. So they're the two squads. 2 days after that Premier League deadline comes the visit of a certain team from down the road for the first North London derby of the season. Arteta's men, obviously without Declan Rice, that's, it's a help. Can't lie. He's a good kind of player that holds their squad or their team together in the middle of the park. Mikel Merino, their new player, obviously got picked up. It was a shoulder injury in training, so he's not available. Which presumably would mean Thomas Partey and Jorginho and Odegaard. Do you imagine the midfield would be something like that? But Spurs will have people back. They should hopefully have Solanke and Van de Ven back, barring anything like a really rubbish next couple of weeks in their kind of timeline and recovery. He needs a little bit of training time ahead of this game. I think being a Sunday helps a little bit. There's probably a little extra day in there. I think Romero plays Tuesday night, so you get him back Thursday, maybe. Depends how maybe he arrives on the Wednesday afternoon, I don't know. But you got then Thursday, Friday and Saturday to get some training into them, which is quite helpful. Look, we know this is going to be the toughest game of the season so far. Of course it is. It's going to be a little bit of a fork in the road, I think, for Spurs as well, in that put in a really impressive performance, get a good result, and it can be the real kickstart and the momentum building for the rest of the season. Struggle against your local rivals, and of course the grumbles grow. We know they will, of course they will, and understandably so. I think no one wants to lose a derby, of course not. And then suddenly, rather than just being one defeat, a draw and a win, it suddenly becomes, you've lost more than anything else. And stadium's going to play its part, of course it is. We talk about Newcastle and the roar that those kind of players go out to. That's exactly what will happen at Spurs. We know it will. There's going to be a great noise there. Need a team firing. They got to do the business, really. Obviously, we pray for no injuries, please, during this international break, and some decent minutes to sharpen those players' legs. Look, it's just been a really weird start to the season. It has. like I said, it's probably for me, and I know people are just going to disagree with this, and everyone's going to have opinion, but I still feel, as I said at the top of this, probably more promising moments and promising things I've seen in these three performances than I saw in the entire second half of last season. I just feel it just needs tightening up at the front and the back, which front's going to happen with the striker coming in, Solanke or Richarlison, and at the back it's going to happen with increased fitness levels. I think that's going to play a big part, and mental sharpness as well. It's down to Postecoglou to fix that. That's all. That's on him as well. It's not like we're just saying he's got nothing to do with this. He's got to find solutions to things. He and his coaching staff. He is the first Spurs coach to last a full season in half a decade. An embarrassing fact for a club that has stuck and stumbled through so many managers in recent years. And we mustn't forget he has undertaken the biggest rebuild that the club has seen in decades. Spurs need to back his changes because the alternative would just be so shambolic. I can't do that all again. And look, don't kind of be mistaken and think that I don't get how frustrated Spurs fans are at the lack of silverware, the lack of a feeling of progress over the years as well. I'm a Spurs fan. I was born a Spurs fan. I had no choice. I was born into all of this. I am as equally frustrated at the lack of silverware as anyone else. However, I don't know if I'm just that kind of person. I just want to commit to a rebuild. If there's going to be a rebuild, fine, but commit to it. I think the more annoying thing is rebuild after rebuild after rebuild that goes nowhere. At least with Postecoglou, I can see a form of football I like. I can see a really exciting group of young players that I like. There's no one that's we've spoken about this before, this Frankenstein's monster of a squad that was just a mix of players bought for totally different managers, whereas it now feels like, who knew the benefit of actually a manager finally getting 2 summer windows to do something? It feels like this is a squad that is fit for the purpose of its manager. We can argue absolutely over whether we would like to see more ready-made names, but in Postecoglou's mind, he says that these players are ready-made. We'll pretty much find that out quite quickly over the next couple of weeks. Because you've got Arsenal and Man U coming up and Brentford at home, in the space of 3 Premier League games around the Carabao Cup and Europa fixtures as well. But yeah, I always go back to the fact that Postecoglou has proven everywhere on his long coaching journey. We're not talking about someone that's been in the game for like 5, 6, 10 years. He's been a coach for 28 years. And throughout his career, every job he's gone into, there's been bumps along the way as he's tried to get the club to where he wants them to be. This isn't unexpected. This isn't, what happened in the second half of last season and little moments like have happened in the first couple of games in this. This isn't like, oh no, where did that come from? This is what happens in his time when he's trying to change clubs into something very different. But what I would always say, history thus far has always shown that he's steered those clubs in the right direction. And for the foreseeable future as well, he's kind of created a foundation within that club to then build upon even after he leaves. So I get it. I get there's going to be a kind of a sense of, I guess missed opportunities is the biggest one early on. And there's going to be a sense of, is the Postecoglou style too kamikaze and crazy? I don't think it is. I just think they've had some sloppy moments in these games. I do think the defending is a lot, like I say, a lot more nuanced than people think it is. And look, these coaches he has, they're all very, very good coaches. They'll be finding ways that the defending suits the game and is better balanced. It's never going to be a very defensive, everyone sat back. But they're going to find ways that people slot in and cover for others. They're going to have ways that if Van der Ven's not in the team with his pace, then someone else is the one that's going to drop back quite quickly as well. Because there is pace there. Doggie's got a turn of pace. Porro's got a turn of pace. There's ways to get around that. They will find solutions. Like I say, Postecoglou does evolve. he hasn't been the same guy. I mean, it was a great answer he gave to a press conference question. I can't remember, it was a couple of weeks back or at the end of last season. It might have been even in pre-season, where he said, like, people talking about different formations. He says, I've been a coach for 28 years. I've played every possible formation you can think of. I've tried every tactical thing in games you can probably think of. Kind of people almost think like he's just some plodder that's come through these like really easy leagues across the other side of the world. It's not going to work here, mate. He has worked in international football. He's come up against so many different kinds of opposition of every level. And over 28 years, you have adapt, you tweak, you evolve. He's not this stubborn, kind of never-changing person people think he is. He's stubborn in terms of his philosophy. He's not stubborn in terms of the way that the team has to play. In terms of being a unit that is not just something that collapses. So yeah, look, let's see where it all goes. Really, really hoping for a good North London derby game. Otherwise, I think everything ratchets up to a kind of another level, and understandably because of the type of game it is. But like I say, this is a massive rebuild, and it kind of feels we're just in the early stages of where it's meant to be going. I know people haven't got patience. I know people are going to get frustrated easier because there's other grievances on the table as well. The running of the club, the ownership, Daniel Levy's decisions, things that have happened over the years. And yeah, you've heard me talk about them. I've spoken about mistakes that I feel that Daniel Levy, Enoch, the club, the board, whatever you want to call it, have made over the years. I've just been going into one about the managers. That, for me, that's almost my biggest annoyance, is not sticking with and backing a manager. If you're going to choose to go in one direction, stick with it. If it is going to be, a Mourinho way of football, stick to it. If it's going to be a Conte way of, stick to it. Conte's a little bit different. It's a little bit volatile. But ultimately, or don't even go away from your own identity in the first place as a club. Stick with that. So yeah, honestly, that's my biggest bugbear about Spurs, is this flip-flopping thing. And look, we do it as fans as well. We absolutely do. We're ready to give up on a style or a project, and we quickly see the negatives within it, even more so when it's not going the way we want it to. And it's the same with young players. We'll call 1 minute for young players to play. Like Mikey Moore and Will Lancashire are going to get a lot of minutes this season. And on the other hand, we're calling in for new players, extra players to come in who will take the place and knock these players down. We're all like that. I'm like that. I'm contradictory, of course. There'll be times I talk so much in these things, I'm going to say stuff that 1 week later is going to sound daft because of something completely different I'm going to say. And yeah, just sticking with it. It is. I'm frustrated at yesterday's result, but not embarrassed like I was. And that's not to say I accept it because, it's better than the last one. Absolutely not. They should have won that game. And that is what needs to be demanded of Spurs going forward, that they're going to dominate these games. Got to put them away. They've got to become ruthless. They've got to become the mean and nasty goal scorers of this Premier League. They've got to show no mercy and be ruthless to all of these teams they come up against. The Postecoglou way is that. I want to see the right players, and I want to see Solanke or Richards. I want to see the right front man. It's going to come. I do believe that. It's, I do. I genuinely do. But hey, I know that's not what all people want to hear. But I get it. We all see things in football in a different way, and that is the beauty of football, that we can all respectfully discuss our different opinions on things. That's the key thing, respectfully. So right, I'm going to head off now. It's getting a little bit later, and it's time for dinner. It is, and yeah, there we go. So I ended it with I'm going off for dinner, just like you really needed to know that. What else we got? We've got an international break. Probably try and do a Q&A. Maybe at the weekend might be the best time to do that, unless anything major happens in the next couple of days. Lots of international football, which is always my least favourite time of the season. As you well know. So yeah, get your questions in below. I'll try and answer as many as I can. Probably at the weekend. Yeah, so as always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves. I shall catch you later. Goodbye.